Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I feel like it's been a minute since I sat down in front of the camera and talked, but here we are. Happy New Year. Today I'm going to do a tier ranking video for all of the books that I read in 2023. My husband is sitting behind my camera right now playing Call of Duty, if you can hear him typing away. That's what that is. So I've got my iPad here in front of me with the tier ranking website that everybody's been using. I first saw this video from Sarah Caroli, so I'm kind of stealing the idea from her a little bit. The tiers that I have set up here, the top one would be Would Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. So these are like my top favorite reads of the year. 6-star reads, pretty self-explanatory. The next one down is Love It. Just didn't have quite that 6-star feeling. So again, I really enjoyed this book. I might have given it a 5-star or maybe even a 4 or 4.5. But I really liked it, but it wasn't like up there as one of my top reads of the year. The next one after that is that I enjoyed it while reading, but I haven't really thought about it since. So these are books that like I may have given them a 4 or even a 4.5 star. And while I was reading them, I absolutely loved them. But after I put it down, I didn't really think much of it. It didn't cross my mind a ton after that. The next one is meh, not bad, but not much to say. So these are kind of like middle of the road books. I don't have any really positive things to say, but nothing super negative either. Probably like a 3-star. The next one down is I finished it, ... So these are books that like I didn't DNF, I still pushed through, but that's really all I have to say about it. And then the final tier there is just big nope. These are likely just books that I DNF'd. If I did finish it, I'm not sure why. It was probably a struggle to finish. I don't think I'm gonna have a ton of books in that tier because I don't think I read any super terrible books last year, honestly. Let's get started. So I'm going from the first book that I read of the new year and going through them in order until I get to the last book that I read of 2023. The first book that I read last year was House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I think I gave this book 4 stars. I'd probably say that this one goes in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about since. There was one part, and I remember seeing people talk about this book and saying that there's a trope in the book that people really don't like. And when you get to that part of the book, you're like, I understand. And it threw me off. Not necessarily in a bad way. It wasn't my favorite thing, but like I didn't hate it either. It was just, it took a weird turn. The next book that I read was Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. This one, I'd also say I enjoyed it while reading, but haven't thought about it since. I also think I might have given that one 4 stars. I think a lot of books are gonna end up in that kind of middle tier because I swear I have this thing where unless it is like a top tier favorite book, once I finish reading it, I forget what happens. Like I remember the general sense of these books, but I don't remember any details. The next book that I read was The Women of Pearl Island. This one was gifted to me by my mom for Christmas the year before, so Christmas of 2022. And I really, I wanted to like this book. I liked the idea of this book. It was just so slow. This one would definitely go in, I finished it. Because I did push through and finish it because my mom gifted it to me, so I wanted to see if it was gonna redeem itself by the end, but it was just so slow. The next book I read was If We Were Villains. This one I think I'm gonna put in meh, not bad, but not much to say. I understand why some people absolutely loved this book. It is some people's one of their top favorite books. But again, it just kind of missed the mark for me a little bit, I think. The next few books that I have here, I got back into my Frida McFadden kind of phase. I read a few of her books at the end of 2022, and then I had a little binge of her books in the beginning of 2023 as well. So the next one was a 5-star read. I will say, since I read it like a year ago now, I don't remember exactly what happened. That being said, I'm still gonna put it in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling, because I remember just being blown away. And after reading a few of Frida McFadden's books, I was like, how is she doing it? How is she doing it again? How are her twists doing this to my brain? And then the next 2 books from her, they were good. I think they missed the mark a little bit. So the next 2 were Do Not Disturb and One by One. And I think I'm going to put both of those in meh, not bad, but not much to say. And then we get to some exciting books here, because the next 2 are the Dance of Thieves and Vow of Thieves duology, and these were my first fantasy books. I think I'm going to put both of them also in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. They were good books, and I think they were relatively easy fantasy books to kind of get into, but I haven't thought about them since. I've been thinking of rereading them, but I have so many other books that I'd rather reread, so I don't know when or if I'll ever actually get into that. The next book that I have is His and Hers by Alice Feeney. I'm going to be honest, don't have a clue what this book was about. Again, I think I did end up giving it like a 3.5 or a 4-star. So I think I'm going to have to put that one also in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since, because I have no idea what happened in that book. And then the next 2 books were Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. Read those back to back. They were better than Dance of Thieves and Vow of Thieves for sure. I think I might have given Six of Crows 4.5 stars and then Crooked Kingdom 4 stars. So they were both like up there. I remember really enjoying my time. Those are 2 that I do want to reread maybe this year. I think I'm going to put both of those in loved it, just didn't give that 6-star feeling. Oh God. So the next book is Perfect Marriage. This was a big nope. I was enjoying this book almost the entire time until the very end. The very end of this book just ruined it for me. I felt like it was just such a cop-out. I felt like the author could have done so much more with the story, and when you get the twist at the end, you're like, oh, that wasn't very fun or interesting at all. The next book is The Housemaid's Secret by Frida McFadden, another Frida McFadden book, shocker. I read The Housemaid by Frida McFadden in 2022, and that's kind of what kickstarted my Frida McFadden obsession. But yeah, I read The Housemaid in 2022, and then 2023 I read The Housemaid's Secret pretty much as soon as it came out. I was unsure because it was one of those things where, did she come out with this second Housemaid's book kind of on the tail of all the hype that the first Housemaid had? Or is the second one actually going to be really good as well? And it was really good as well. So I think I'm going to put that one in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. The next book that I read was my first Stephen King book, which I am so proud of my little Stephen King collection. Fun fact, I started collecting Stephen King books because I had them on kind of my Amazon wish list. I had a few books by him that I wanted to try reading, but I didn't know when I was actually ever gonna go ahead and purchase them. But I used to work as a hairstylist in salon. I am no longer doing that anymore, but I still occasionally will cut some of my friend's hair. So my friend came over and got his hair cut, and he was asking me how much he should pay me or whatever, and I was like, you know what, I'll just send you my Amazon book wish list and just pick something off there and send that to me, and that's your payment. Because why would I take money when I can get books? You know what I mean? Eventually that money is just going to be spent on the books anyways. So he actually bought me my first Stephen King book. And ever since then, every time I cut his hair, he buys me a new Stephen King book. Anyways, that was a little tangent. But the first one that I read was Misery. And I think I'm going to put this one in Enjoyed While Reading, but haven't thought about it since. The next book I read was Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. And it was probably one of the bigger disappointments I had this year, because I loved Things We Never Got Over so much. I read that one in 2022, I believe. And I loved it so much. Everything about it. That was like a 6-star read. And then when I read Things We Hide from the Light, I had such high hopes for it because I loved the first one so much. But I think it missed the mark a little bit. I think I still gave it maybe 4 stars, but honestly, now thinking back to it, that's a little bit generous. I think I would have to put this one in meh, not bad, but not much to say.
You look cute.
So the next book that I read was 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. This one was fantastic. I think I'm going to put this one in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. And this was such a bingeable book. I might have even read this book in one sitting, to be honest. So the next 3 books that I read were A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, and A Court of Wings and Ruin. And I don't think anyone's going to be surprised that all of these books are going into Would Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. The ACOTAR series is just, it can't be beat. It really can't be beat. It's so good. The next book that I read was The Maid's Diary. I think I'm gonna put this one in Enjoyed While Reading, but haven't thought about it since. I remember enjoying it quite a bit. If you ask me what it was about, no idea. It's a thriller. Someone died. That's all I got for you, sorry. The next book that I read was 20 Years Later. I believe it was about an investigation, and it was like a then and now timeline regarding a death from 9/11. It's totally fictional. It wasn't nonfiction or anything. There was probably some factual information in there, but it was a fictional story. I think this one I'd put in meh, not bad, but not much to say. The next book I have is A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is the novella in the ACOTAR series after A Court of Wings and Ruin. This one, it's basically like the Hallmark holiday novella in the ACOTAR series. It's cute, it's fun. There's nothing really much going on. I would put this one in Enjoyed While Reading, but haven't thought about it since. Short little intermission to say hi to my cat. Look how large he is. He's so big. He was just like cuddled up on the ground over there because he just wanted to be near Mom. So the next book that I read was, again, back on the Stephen King train. It was Billy Summers. This one was interesting because I think a lot of people assume that Stephen King writes purely horror or like scary sort of terror books. But most of the books that I've read by him were either just like thrillers or like crime mysteries. This one was good. I liked Billy Summers. I'd probably say Enjoyed While Reading, but haven't thought about it since. Actually, no, you know what? I'm going to put it in not bad, but not much to say. It was almost like reading a literary fiction. But yeah, I guess the tier kind of is self-explanatory, not much to say. The next book that I read was A Familiar Stranger by A.R. Tour. I really like her writing. I wouldn't say they're like 5-6-star reads by any means. The plots are a little bit weak maybe, but they're entertaining, which is why I like them. Like if I want an entertaining, easy thriller that I can just speed through, I'm going for A.R. Tour. I would probably put that in Enjoyed While Reading, but haven't thought about it since. The next book I read was, I think it was the only nonfiction book that I read last year. And it's actually a book that has triggered me to read more nonfiction, specifically more memoirs. The next book I read was I Wish My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I think I'm going to put this in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. The next book that I read was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This was the first book that I've read by him. But oh my God, it was so good. This one is immediately going into Would Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. Would highly recommend reading that book. It's like a psychological sci-fi thriller. The next book that I read was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I listened to that one on audiobook as well. I've seen the movie, so like I knew what happened at the end of this book, so it's not like there was anything super crazy. I would probably put this one in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. I was gonna put it in meh, not bad, but not much to say. But that's only because I've seen the movie, so the plot twist didn't really hit as hard. I think if I had read this book without knowing what was going to happen, I'd rate it higher. So that's why I'm putting it in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since, because I think that's a bit more of a fair judgment of the book. The next book is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. This was the first book in the Magnolia Parks universe. I just remember going into this book and like one of the main things that I had heard about this book was that it was Gossip Girl in the UK, which is true. But there's just so much more to it than that. This book hit so hard. It is going in Would Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. The next book, everyone's favorite fantasy of the year, Fourth Wing. I absolutely adored this. I still think that it was one of my favorite books of the year. Therefore, would trade Kidney to reread for the first time. It was amazing. The next book that I read was Daisy Hates by Jessa Hastings. The first Daisy Hates book didn't hit quite as hard, probably because I just don't really care about Christian. I'm sorry. Ooh. Maybe my mind will change as more Daisy Hates books come out. But when I was reading the first Daisy Hates book, I just didn't care. I liked Daisy. She's a badass, but I could care less about Christian. I'm sorry. I think I'm going to put that one in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. The next book that I read was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I listened to this one on audiobook. This one is, again, it's one of those books that's hard for me to rate because it's not like it's new to me. I love the entire Harry Potter series. I love the movies. I love the books. Like, I can't possibly rate it anything less than 5 stars, so I just don't even bother. You know what? I would probably trade a kidney to reread or rewatch all of the Harry Potter movies for the first time. So, just by that alone, I guess I'm putting that in Would Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. I just hold them so near and dear to my heart. The next book that I read was Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This was my first Brando Sando book, and it did not disappoint. This one, I think I'm going to put it in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. The next book is The It Girl by Ruth Ware. Racking my brain. No idea what this book's about. Can't remember a single thing. I think I'm going to put it in meh, not bad, but not much to say. The next book that I read was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This one is also going to be a little bit controversial, I think, because so many people love this book. And I didn't hate it. It was a little bit slow, I think, and I think because I'd heard so many good things and it was kind of super hyped up, it didn't hit like I was hoping it would. So I think I'm going to put that one in meh, not bad, not much to say. The next book that I read was Bunny by Mona Awad. This one is either going in I finished it, ... or big nope. I think I'm going to have to put it in big nope. Because the entire book I was just thinking, what am I reading? I think a lot of it just went totally over my head, maybe. The next book that I read was another Frida McFadden book. This one was Ward D. This one, I can remember what happened in it, which is kind of shocking. But I will say I haven't thought about it since I finished it. So I'm going to put this one in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. Now we're on to Red Rising. I think I'd probably have to put it in meh, not bad, but not much to say. But I think I'm just going to have to try rereading it at some point and see if my mind changes. So the next book is the other Blake Crouch book that I read this year called Recursion. Immediately, this book is going into Would Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. Then we're moving on to A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This one is obviously going into Would Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. The next book that I read was The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I'd put this one in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. The next book that I read was Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. I think by principle, I also have to put this one in Would Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. The next book that I read was The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. I think most people, when they first get into Brandon Sanderson, they will either go with Warbreaker or the Mistborn trilogy. It was good, though. It was really entertaining. I think the first book out of the trilogy is my favorite. The other two get a little bit not necessarily complicated, but I think when you're learning everything about the world, it's a little bit more exciting in the first book, whereas the second and third book are more about like the actual war and action and politics and stuff that are going on. The first book in the series, I think I'm going to put it in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. The next book that I read was The Snows of Nissa. No idea what this book was about. So that being said, I'm going to put that one in meh, not bad, but not much to say. The next two books that I read are the Crown of Nyaxia duology. So that is The Serpent and Wings of Night and The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. The first one, 5-star. It was so good. I'm gonna have to put that one in Would Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. The second one was also really good. It just didn't hit quite as hard. So that one I'm gonna put in loved. Just didn't have that 6-star feeling. The next book was the final book in the Harry Potter series. So that is The Deathly Hallows. That one, I don't even need to say it. It's going in Would Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. We're moving on to the most heart-wrenching book of 2023, Magnolia Park's The Long Way Home. This was such a good book that had me sobbing, crying, screaming, kicking my feet. I mean, it gave me all the emotions, really, but mostly sobbing, mostly crying. Anyways, this one is obviously going in Would Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. The next book that I read was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This one's also going to be a little bit of a controversial opinion. This one is going to go in meh, not bad, but not much to say. I think because of the way that the book was written, because it's written in like an interview style, it was hard to get some context, and it was kind of, sometimes it turned into just he said, she said sort of thing, and you're left to wonder what actually happened. The next book that I read was A History of Dragons by a memoir by Lady Trent by Marie Brennan. This book, I really enjoyed it while reading. I think I'm going to put it in I enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. It's a good, like, very low stakes, almost no stakes fantasy book. And it's funny because I actually loaned that book to my mom as well, and she said the exact same thing. She was like, yeah, it was good. It was okay, but nothing really happened. The next book I read was From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Definitely goes in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. The next book that I read was Fairy Tale by Stephen King. And this so far is my favorite Stephen King book to date. I'm going to put this one in Wood Trade Kidney to read for first time, though that is a little bit generous. I wouldn't say that I would give it 6 stars. It's definitely a 5 stars, but it is a solid 5 stars. I don't know if I would trade my kidney to reread it for the first time. However, that being said, I mean, I remember the gist of what happens in this book, but I could probably read it again and it would almost be like rereading it for the first time. The next book that I read was Daisy Hates The Great Undoing. I liked it more than the first Daisy Hates book, but not as much as the Magnolia Parks books. So this one I think I'm going to put in loved it, but just didn't have that 6-star feeling. Which, I mean, I put both of the Daisy Hates books in that same tier, but I definitely liked the second one a little bit more, probably because there was more Julian in there. The next book that I read was Pet Sematary by Stephen King. This one I had high hopes for because I think it is, other than it's probably one of the more well-known Stephen King books. It was good. I was expecting it to be a lot scarier. It wasn't all that scary to me, but it was still good. I will probably put this one in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. Then I started the next Sarah J. Maas universe, which was the Throne of Glass series. I started with Assassin's Blade. I know some people will start with Assassin's Blade or they'll read that one like 3rd or 4th or something like that. I started with it because I wanted to read it more in like publication order. I wanted to read it how Sarah J. Maas anticipated or wanted it to be read. I really liked it. I honestly enjoyed all of the short stories. I liked getting the backstory. I understand why it might be a little bit more emotional if you read Assassin's Blade later on, but I like knowing the information and having that information when I'm reading the future books. So this one in particular, I'm going to put in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. The next book I read was Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. Again, this is the second book in the Mistborn trilogy. And this is where it got a little bit slower and a little bit more politics heavy in the second book here. I still liked it, but there was just a lot more to it, so it took a little bit more brain power. So I think I'm going to put this one in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. The next book I read was Fatal Affair by A.R. Torr. Again, as I've said before, it was a good, entertaining thriller. Nothing to cry home about, though. I'm probably going to put this one in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. Then we have Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This was my first and so far my only book that I've read by her. I do want to read more because I've heard good things about her other books as well. I ended up giving it 5 stars. I was obsessed. I was kicking, screaming, giggling the entire time. It gave me butterflies. I really did enjoy it. This one I think I'm going to put in... I'm gonna be a little bit more generous. I'm gonna put this one in Wood Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. The next book that I read was The Quarry Girls by Jess Lowry. This one was a mystery thriller, and that is all I remember about that one. So that being said, I'm going to put that one in I finished it. The next book that I have is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. The ending, I thought that I guessed the ending, and I did guess a part of it. And then you get to the actual ending, and I did not guess that at all. So Riley Sager did throw me through a couple hoops there at the end. So this one... I'm still just going to put it in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since because I haven't really thought about it since finishing it. The next book that I read is Twilight. And this is kind of similar to the Harry Potter series as well. I've seen the movies so many times. I've read the books already, so it's hard for me to really rate them. That being said, I don't feel as strongly about the Twilight series as I do about Harry Potter, so I wouldn't trade a kidney to reread or rewatch them for the first time. But I'm going to put it in loved it. Just didn't have that 6-star feeling. And then I read The Gracier by Kim Liggett, I believe. I really liked this book. It's YA, but I think it's almost on the cusp. I feel like, depending on the age of YA, I wouldn't necessarily call it YA. There's some quite gory, gruesome scenes in this book. It is classified as horror, YA horror though, so I wouldn't trade a kidney for it though, so I'm gonna put that one in loved it. Just didn't have that 6-star feeling. The next book that I read was the Mindfuck series. That one 100% would trade a kidney to reread for the first time. It was so good. I don't have much else to say. It was just so good. You have to read it. I mean, definitely look up trigger warnings beforehand. There's some quite graphic stuff in that series. The next book I read was Things We Do in the Dark by Jennifer Hillier. I think I remember some stuff that happened in this book, but again, standard with thrillers. Once I read them in one ear and out the other, I'm going to put this one in meh, not bad, but not much to say. Then the next book that I read was Throne of Glass, so the official first book of the Throne of Glass series. I really liked the first book. I think the first and second book of the series were really good and really entertaining, and I loved them in different ways than I loved the rest of the series. I think I'm going to put the first one in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. The next book that I read was The Memory Wood. This one was really good. I remember really enjoying it and thinking that it was written really well. I can't remember exactly what ended up happening in it, but I do really remember enjoying it. I think I'm going to put this one in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling, because although I don't think about it a ton, I do remember really enjoying reading it. The next book that I read was Hero of Ages, which is the third and final book in the Mistborn trilogy. Same deal as the second book. It was good. I enjoyed it while I was reading it, but it was definitely more politics heavy. So I'm going to do that as enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. Same as the second book. And then I read the second book in Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight. This one I think I liked a little bit more than the first one, than Throne of Glass. This one I think I am going to put in would trade kidney to reread for the first time. Then I read Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Yeah, this book was okay. I think I'm going to put it in meh, not much to say about it, because again, it was one of those books that was quite hyped up, I think, and it just missed the mark a little bit for me. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. Then I went back to the Throne of Glass series again, and I read Heir of Fire. This one I'm also going to put in loved it, but didn't have that 6-star feeling. The next book that I read was The Book Thief. This one I'm going to put in meh, not bad, but not much to say. The next book that I read was Butcher and Blackbird. This one kind of had similar vibes to the Mindfuck series. I definitely liked the Mindfuck series more, but this one, as a single standalone book, it was entertaining. I think I'm going to put that one in... I'm going to be a little bit generous here actually and put it in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. But the next book that I read was Mad Honey, which was a crime mystery sort of thriller book. This one I'm going to put in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. The next book that I read was the second book in the Twilight series, which is New Moon. Same thing as the first Twilight book. I'm going to put it in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. And then we have my next Stephen King installment, which is The Institute. I really liked this one as well. I think I'm going to put that one in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. The next book that I read was The Girl with All the Gifts. I liked it when I was reading it. but I think the writing was really good as well, but I haven't thought about it since. So enjoyed it, but haven't thought about it since. The next book that I read was Queen of Shadows, the next book in the Throne of Glass series. That one, aside from Crown of Midnight, I'd say Queen of Shadows was probably my next favorite. I think I'm probably gonna put it in Wood Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. The next book that I read, also part of the Throne of Glass series, I actually did a tandem read with these next two books, Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn, which I think is the best way to read those two books. I know a lot of people say that Tower of Dawn is super boring and they didn't like it. It was their least favorite of the series. They didn't feel like it even belonged in the series. But I actually quite liked it. I liked both the characters and the plot lines of both of these books. I can understand why Tower of Dawn might be a little bit boring or a little bit slower if you were reading it on its own. But I think reading them in the tandem read helped to kind of make it feel not as slow. So I'm gonna put both of those in Wood Trade Kidney to read for the first time. And then I read the third book in the Twilight series, which is Eclipse. Same situation, loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. And then we reach the conclusion of the Throne of Glass series, which is Kingdom of Ash. I don't think I need to say much else about this other than it's going in Wood Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. The next book that I read was Iron Flame. This one is immediately going into Wood Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. The next book that I read was Good Bad Girl by Alice Feeney. I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember what happened in this book. I think I enjoyed it while reading. I'm gonna put it in meh, not much to say, only because I assume that I enjoyed it while reading because I enjoy most of Alice Feeney's books, but really I don't remember enough of it to even remember if I enjoyed it. The next book that I read was Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I'm gonna put that one in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. The next book that I read was The Brothers Hawthorne. I'm gonna put it in meh, not bad, but not much to say. And then I read Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. I don't remember much of it though. I'm gonna put in not bad, but not much to say. The next book I read was Local Woman Missing. This one I do remember really enjoying it, but I haven't thought about it since. So, and then I started the Addicted series. I'm gonna put Addicted and Ricochet in loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. The next book that I read was Never by Jessa Hastings. And a lot of people are feeling like this was not the best book ever, which, like, fair. I wouldn't say that it was my favorite book of all time. However, I still want to put this in Wood Trade Kidney to reread for the first time. And I'll also say that I did only give it 4 stars, but something about it, it was one of those books that I was like, this is weird. And parts of it gave me the big ick, and I was like, this is weird, and I don't know how I feel, and but something about Jessa Hastings' writing I can't get over. And then I read the final book in the Twilight series, which is Breaking Dawn. Same thing. Loved it. Just didn't have that 6-star feeling. Then I read Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. I'm going to put that one in enjoyed while reading, but haven't thought about it since. Then I read Pen Pal. This one was quite a short, like, horror thriller book. It was gifted to me by a friend who had heard good things about it. She hadn't read it or anything, but she'd heard good things about it. I have never heard about it, or I had never heard about it before reading it. It was good. It was weird. It was creepy. It gave me goosebumps. But it wasn't like anything special, I don't think. I'm gonna put it in meh, not bad, but not much to say. The next book that I read was the first book in the Hunger Games series, and this is again going to be a similar situation to Twilight. I've seen the movies multiple times. I've read the books. already, so nothing was like a surprise, but I think I'm gonna put it in. Loved it, just didn't have that 6-star feeling. All right, we have made it to the last book that I read in 2023, and that was Snowed In. So for the last book of the year, I went with a cheesy winter holiday romance. It was good. I enjoyed it while reading, but will never think about it again. Probably won't ever reread it. It was just one of those books to put me in kind of the Christmas holiday spirit. All right, guys, we finally made it to the end. That was all 95 books that I read in 2023. Man, some of them, I think most of them, after reading them and thinking on them, I think most of them are still pretty much in the same spot that they were when I read them. But there was a few that definitely, like, you tell me, did I read that book last year? I don't know. Was it that great? I don't know. Like, it's actually shocking to me how many books I consume and remember nothing of. I had a great year. It was a good reading year overall. There was clearly a lot of books that I would sell my kidneys for. I don't have that many kidneys, so yeah. That is all for this video. Thank you for listening to me talk for God knows how long. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in my next video.